So good afternoon, everyone. It is, you know what? I'm never going to say what day it is anymore. I'm just going to say welcome. I'm Audrey Russo, and I know it's 2021, and we are doing our daily business as usual, and I am thrilled to be here. I can't wait to introduce our guest today. She's almost on as much as Jonathan and I are on this show, so we're pretty excited. I think this is her fourth time with us, and Kelly Hunt, I'll formally introduce her in a moment. She is making her first appearance with this year and talking about the new PPP. So before we get started, I want to give a shout out to Huntington Bank. They certainly are going to be busy through this process. They're always busy, but they're certainly partners who you should seek as you start to unravel and we start to plot this next iteration of the payroll protection loan process, which Kelly is here to talk about. And also 40 by 80, that's the longitude and latitude of Pittsburgh and the wholly owned subsidiary of the Pittsburgh Tech Council, where we work on tech, entrepreneurship, as well as workforce development. So we've muted your microphones and we've allowed an opportunity for chat. We're going to pack a lot in this session. So just wear your seatbelts and be patient with us as we start to work with and have a conversation with Kelly Hunt. So Kelly Hunt, thank you so much for being here. I mean, you have been a tremendous partner to this region through the, even before the pandemic, but during the pandemic, I cannot even imagine how you have kept up and are even keeping up right now. So you are leading Western Pennsylvania in all things related to the SBA, and hopefully we have time about some of the new things that you're offering that we're going to talk about. But I think what most people want to understand is, so what's new? What's new with this PPP? What's new? What are some of the major components? What are some of the changes? What are some of the things that we need to be thinking about? And also, I hope that you have been safe and taking some time for yourself, because I know this has been just a zany time for everyone. So thank you again.
Thank you, Audrey. I have been safe. I've been COVID free, and believe me, I do move about the cabin quite a bit. So that's been a real blessing. And the SBA, it has been a year. I'll tell you, we went from a very small, almost unknown agency, federal agency, to really thrust into the limelight. And we do have a lot of amazing things that are going on that are outside of the PPP and the EIDL programs. And this economic aid act was very long in coming. We, along with you guys and most of our businesses that we work with, were really desperate back in August to see some relief come. We really thought that would happen. I probably said too many times, it's going to be coming, this is a bipartisan effort. Everybody loves small business, and but it didn't happen. And so, we waited quite a long time and finally got to the point where we do have the Economic Aid Act that is relaunching the Paycheck Protection Program. It also did make some changes to EIDL, which I will just briefly touch on later on, just so that you guys understand what that, especially the EIDL advance, what is changing there. So the PPP relaunch does look a lot different this round. It's different than what we had in the past. We have some new terminology. So we're still calling it the PPP, but we're doing a new spin on some words. And so we're going to have the PPP first draw, it's going to be called. The first draw is going to be for people that have never applied for a PPP, never received a PPP in the past. They are going to be eligible to apply for a first-time PPP called the first draw. It's going to be very similar, same terms on that loan, same forgiveness as in the past, but it will reopen for those. And then we have what was very long awaited, and that is the second draw PPP. The second draw PPP is for people, businesses that have already had a PPP. They have spent it on eligible expenses Okay, spent it on eligible expenses is what the act says, and that doesn't have to have been forgiven yet, but they do have to have used it all before the second PPP, the second draw PPP is dispersed from a bank. So that is going to be really exciting. There are some changes in that. We will get into right now. The PPP loan portal is open. It is open only though for a very small number of lenders. We call those community financial institutions, which are made up of a couple different types of community lenders, our CDFIs, our MDIs, and some others. In the Pittsburgh area, we don't have a lot of CFIs that were interested in doing PPP loans this round. We do have some that are nationally recognized that can lend money here in Western Pennsylvania. We do have one that is a Western Pennsylvania lender. It's headquartered in New York, but we have some really good loan officers here in Pennsylvania, and that's Pursuit. So Pursuit is open and accepting loans. No, those loans can only be from underserved communities at this point. So these are going to be women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses. So these areas can apply through Pursuit, but they can also wait and apply, as soon as the portal opens with the lender who they normally bank with. We don't foresee any problem with maintaining enough money in the fund to fund everyone who needs the PPP first draw or second draw. So, we tell people it's really good to go with a bank where you have your deposits, where everything you're already doing. So, so you could do that. So that's going on now. Tomorrow, on Wednesday, tomorrow, that portal for the CFIs will open for second draw applicants as well, and then all we know is that shortly after that time it will open for everyone. So we're anticipating that to happen relatively quickly. So that's kind of an overview.
Right. So let's talk about, where do you want to start? Like, just to peel back, because you have people here, like someone asked about 501c6s, they might be new, but where do you want to start for people who actually have had the opportunity of the first round? Do you want to start with that?
Yeah, let's talk about, what are the updates? What does it look like? What's different this time? And so, I've told you there's two draws this time. So there's a first draw for people that haven't received it, a second draw for people that have. So eligibility for a second draw PPP is different than it was for a first draw. So in order to be able to get it, I had alluded to one of the points there being the fact that you had to have used all of your first draw money, and you had to use that on eligible expenses. Now, it doesn't go into talk really what that exactly means. It's kind of a gray area we're trying to get some clarification on, but at first glance, that tells me that if you took out a PPP in the initial PPP and you did not spend it on all eligible expenses, and you have to repay a portion of that, it was not forgiven, not because of the idle advance, but because maybe you made some payments on some bills that weren't eligible, that you may have trouble getting a second round PPP, because the act does say that it has to have been used for eligible expenses before the second draw can be dispersed. So that is one of the things. Also different in the second draw PPP is that in the first draw, a business had to have less than 500 employees. For a second draw, they've lowered that down to 300. So a business can only have 300 employees, and that is all of your affiliates included. So if you own say you own a company that has many different locations, but you're all owned under that one company, you would have to include all of the employees at all of those locations. Maybe you own a string of McDonald's, and you would have to count up all of those employees. So it has to be under 300. And then you also have to demonstrate a 25% reduction in gross receipts looking at a comparable quarter from 2019 and 2020. Yeah, 2019, 2020. So you can pick what quarter that is, because this is kind of one of those areas where we have some businesses that actually were able to make a profit in 2020. But we want to show, so this is going to give you the flexibility to pick a quarter where you actually are below your gross revenues in 2020 from where you were in 2019. So you're going to have to show some loss in one quarter during the year to be able to get the PPP on that
You can
second
pick
draw.
the quarter. Is that correct?
You can
Like,
pick,
you can
yeah.
the quarter. Okay.
Yeah, and you're encouraged to pick the quarter that works best for you.
Okay.
So, it's not like you're scamming the system or anything. You just have to have one quarter of loss to qualify.
Okay. Okay, great. You have a couple of questions just real quick.
Okay.
Jonathan, you want to grab them? We already said
Yeah.
501c6s.
Yeah.
Yes, can apply,
Right.
right?
Great.
They just have to be careful with the amount of money they used in lobbying.
Right.
Remove that expense, and then they can qualify just like everyone else.
Right.
You're pumped about that, that's for sure.
Okay.
Yes,
So,
I know.
So Richard Brugman wants to know, will it be employee retention requirements again for the second draw on the PPP?
Yes, there will always be those requirements in that PPP, because as I always mention, it's called the Paycheck Protection
Right.
Program. It is designed to maintain paychecks for America's employees of small businesses. So there will always be that requirement if you want your loan to be forgiven. If you're going to use your loan for eligible expenses and request a forgiveness, then yes, you will have to maintain the requirements for employment.
Very cool.
And there's some leeway in there, and I won't get into all, there's a lot of different aspects of that, but it does allow for some reductions, and there, I think the SBA is looking at it as a realist and saying, look, we understand, you can't maintain everybody at that top level, especially, if we're maxing out loan amounts at 2 million. But you do have to have that maintained. Yes.
Gotcha. And Whit Little wants to know, for the second draw, if employee count is between 300 and 500, will SBA small business size standard apply to qualify?
No.
Okay.
No, it does have to be lower than 300.
Very cool.
That is all that I read in the act.
Gotcha.
Okay.
And
So
Bob
then-
Chappell, the questions are rolling in here, wants to know what type of documentation are they looking for regarding loss of revenue? Can you provide them records from your accounting system comparing the same quarter from 2019 and 2020?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what you're going to do if if you're a smaller business and you're running QuickBooks. You're just going to do a quarter by quarter comparison. If you have an accountant, you're going to call your accountant and say, look at all my 4 quarters, tell me where I had the biggest difference, and print me off the records. And that's what you're going to do. And keep in mind with the PPP, first draw, second draw, doesn't matter.
Okay.
You're going to be providing those to your local bank, whoever you're applying for that PPP loan.
Right.
The SBA will not look at those initially.
Right.
You're going to apply to your local bank. Your bank is going to recommend approval on that, and they'll send it into the SBA, and then the SBA will have eyes on that. But we do take the recommendation from your local lender very, very seriously.
Very cool. And Rick Cancelleri wants to know, it seems as though if your loan is under $150,000, you can still apply without defining a quarter where you experienced a loss. However, it may just not be forgiven. Can you expand more on that?
They still have to meet the regardless of the size. I think that there's a confusion between what you need to do for forgiveness and what you're going to need to do for a second draw. For forgiveness, a part of the act did make some changes, or in the process of making some big changes to loan forgiveness. So if you had a PPP loan that was less than $150,000, the forgiveness process will be simplified greatly. There's some new applications out. I don't know Exactly. We just got an email late last night on applications. I'm not positive that that new forgiveness application is out yet. I don't think it is, but it will make it much easier. But as far as applying for a loan, you still have the same requirements in applying for a second draw loan. You do have to show the reduction. You have to show that you had a quarter of losses. You have to have the less than 300. You still have to meet those requirements.
Such good information here. And one last question here from Courtney Williamson wants to know, any documentation about forgiveness for the second draw?
We don't have it yet. Like I said, the new act did make a lot of changes to forgiveness. So I'll just spend a couple of seconds talking about that now, just to give you an idea. So it has, as I had mentioned earlier, if you have a loan under $150,000, it has made that requirement for forgiveness, the process to have that loan forgiven, much easier. And so the SBA is working diligently to get those loan forms updated and to get that done. Now, with the second draw, I'm sure it'll be the same way, where they will make that a lot easier to do that forgiveness. Now, a big problem in the first round of PPP was that EIDL advance. And so the EIDL advance was the part of the EIDL program that was a grant. We call it an advance, but it was technically a grant. And that was up to $10,000. So businesses, when you applied for an EIDL, you applied for the EIDL advance as well, because it was free money. Everybody applied for that. And you got between $1,000 and $10,000, depending on the number of employees you had. If you had one employee, you got 1,000, 5 employees, 5,000, 10, or 500, you got the maximum 10,000. What had happened was in the interim final rules that were published, it required the bank to take out any EIDL advance that a business had received and take that out of the amount of PPP loan that was forgiven. Because what would happen is they were looking at it as a business was double dipping at the federal government, right? You got a grant here, and then you're getting this loan amount forgiven. And so they were saying, no, that's too much. If you got that EIDL advance, and you say you got $150,000 PPP, you applied for forgiveness for $150,000, you spent every penny accurately and on eligible expenses, and you get your forgiveness back and it says you have $140,000 forgiven, you owe the government $10,000. So that was a huge issue, very big issue, especially for the very small businesses, because if you had 500 employees and you got free 10,000, I mean, that's nothing. But if you had 9 employees and you got 9,000, that was a big difference. And so what happened in the second round, in this relaunch in the Economic Aid Act, they have said, no, we're not doing that. We're taking that out. So what has happened, though, we have a lot of loans that have been forgiven already, and a lot of loans in this process, and people are either paid off the debt that they owed the government or making payments. So the SBA has to go back and make all of those right. So if you had an EIDL advance, it was deducted from your PPP loan forgiveness amount, you will be refunded that amount of money. What will happen is the SBA is working on the process now of how this is going to occur, but they will refund that money back to your lender. If you have a balance there, like in the scenario I mentioned where you had a $150,000 loan, but only 140 was forgiven, the SBA is going to give 10,000 back to the lender. The lender will first take that money and apply it to the loan. Okay, so if you have a balance, it will be applied. If you've already made that right and paid off that loan, then your lender will eventually get that money refunded back to you. So that was a big issue. So we don't have that. And then there were some other issues with taxes on what if money was spent with the EIDL advance, with the PPP, you use that free money, that you've gotten forgiven, states wanted to be able to tax that. They didn't want you to be able to claim expenses. So you're a business, you write off your business expenses, you use the money for your for your lease payment like you were supposed to. And now the IRS and a lot of state governments came in and said, oh no, now we want to tax that money because you can't claim that as an expense because that wasn't really your business's money, that was government money. And so that was an issue, and that was cleared up as well in this legislation.
Okay. So there you go. You got a thank you from someone saying
Yeah.
that you're a rock
Thank you,
star.
Courtney. You're wonderful.
There you go, that you're a rock star. Okay, so did we cover both dimensions of it now? Or do you feel like we got to all the points?
There's probably some more things that I could probably tell you.
Right.
A couple more updates like on the new second draw PPP. So we had talked about a couple. We had talked about, some of the more negative sides, like, the business can only be 300 employees. You have to have used the money, those kinds of things. But there's a lot of great changes that we saw in that as well. One is, of course, that it did open up the eligible pool of applicants, which, of course, Pittsburgh Technical Council is a beneficiary of, because now 501c6s can apply. So they did open that up. There's a couple other changes, but not as significant in that, but it did open up for other businesses to be able, and nonprofits to be able to apply for that money. The business does have to have been in existence before February 15, 2020 to apply for the money, because you had to, be there before COVID started. The PPP expenses, those eligible expenses, it used to be you can only use it on rent, mortgage interest, and utilities. Remember, those were the three. It had to fit into that, or salaries and payroll, right? Had to fit into those. They have now expanded that three. Those still are three of the eligible expenses, but now you can also include certain property damage costs. So if you're located in Kenosha or Portland and you've had significant damage to your building because of rioting and different things, that is an eligible expense for PPP funds. Some supplier costs now are eligible, especially some worker protection costs. So if you've had to install new things, maybe you had to buy equipment so to allow your team to work remotely. You had to make a lot of changes to your networks and security and different things. These are going to be eligible expenses now for a PPP that really are going to benefit. And remember, we're now at 60%, 40%. So it used to be 80-20 when it first came out. 60% of the funds have to go to salary, payroll expenses. Okay. But that other 40% now can be used well beyond just leases and mortgage interest and utilities. And, some of the other things are changes to like ventilation systems that needed to be done. Like I said, a lot of PPE, those types of things, those are all going to be eligible. It also, the PPP also provides a greater flexibility for seasonal employees. So we had a lot of problems before when we were calculating payroll costs for seasonal employees. There's some changes if you have seasonal employees. I'm not an expert on that one yet, but make sure you take a look at that. The idle advance no longer being deducted is a big one. The taxes with the IRS, huge one. Some of the states, we're still waiting to see what the states are going to do, because a lot of people that are filing taxes are going to see that the state is going to come after them for some of this money that they've used to write off on their business expenses. So we want to make sure that we're hoping that states follow that as well. The deadline for the PPP is March 31st. And so that is March 31st, 2021. And that is for both the first draw and second draw. So regardless of which draw you're looking at, the deadline is March 21st. So you want to make sure that on this, on the new legislation, you can choose the amount of time you use to spend the money. So when we first came out, all money had to be spent in 8 weeks. Then when the second round came out, it could be 8 weeks or 24 weeks. And that was when we came out with that second pot of funding for PPP last summer. Now we're saying that you can choose The borrower has a choice to choose how much, what time frame they want to spend the funds in, and it can be anywhere between 8 weeks and 24 weeks. And so you're going to get to choose what works best for your business. Now, I was talking to Audrey a little bit before we came on air, and one of the issues with that is if you've not received a PPP and you're applying for a first draw PPP, we believe, and I'm going to say believe because we don't have confirmation on this yet, but for how everything is written, we believe that those businesses will still be able to apply for a second draw. So we can't find anywhere that says you can't. So, but it does say you have to have spent the money on eligible expenses in its entirety before the second draw is dispersed. And so if we know the program's closing on March 31st, we want to make sure that people who are getting a first draw get it pretty quickly, and then use the money in that 8-week period on eligible expenses so they can still apply for that second draw. So that's going to work out.
Let me just ask you something. We have a few minutes here and there's
Sure.
still a lot of questions that are coming in, but for minority-owned businesses, are there any changes? Is there new allocation, or is there any set aside?
Yeah, there is. They are holding back some money for just minority-owned businesses. They also have where the SBA staff that is processing these, they have special staff that are allotted their time and attendance to work just on minority applications. On I don't want to say minority, on underserved applications. So from underserved, which would be women, minority, and veteran.
Okay.
So and even on top of those things, there is a concentrated effort of the SBA along with our lenders to actually promote this in ways. We've been doing a lot of stakeholder calls with minority groups to make sure that the minority businesses have access to the funds. And we want to make sure that they know that this is out there, that and so we've been working very closely on a national level with a lot of these groups that can help us to get that word out there. But yes, we are really working hard to make sure that happens.
So I want to be sensitive to your time. There's lots and lots of questions that are on here. And even the one that just got popped up about
about the farmers.
Yeah, about the farmers, and was there any aid for farmers in the
well,
new
you
bill?
can be an agricultural business and apply for the PPP. I believe that the writer was correct that there are other funding pools, and especially I would check with the Department of Agriculture, especially the rural development wing of the Department of Agriculture. I would check with them, USDA, rural development, to see what they have. But agricultural businesses are allowed. One other issue I just remembered that is really a big one, and that is, the loan is based on a 2-month salary cycle, a 2-month payroll cycle, I should say. 2.5 times that 2-month period is going to be the loan amount. There is a new exception, a new change to that though, with some types of businesses, and those are going to be the businesses that are the hardest hit. And so businesses that have a NAICS code that start with 72, these are going to be a lot of your accommodation and food service businesses. They get to multiply their 2-month payroll expense by 3.5. And so their loan amount is going to be higher than other businesses because they have been hit so hard.
So obviously there are more questions. So 2 things. One is, if people have questions, can they reach out to your office?
Yes.
Is there a website that you can just enter in there?
2 things I will tell you. If you have questions, WPAinfo@sba.gov.
Okay.
So it stands for Western Pennsylvania Info. So WPAinfo@sba.gov. I have a team that is dedicated to that email account. They check it constantly have it up on their computer, and any question that comes, you're given an answer, or we send it out. If it's a question that has to be answered by my management team, it goes out and we will get back to you very quickly. That is definitely the best way. For information and a copy of everything that I've talked about, you can get to a lot of one-pagers that have a lot of great information. Go to sba.gov/PPP. So the SBA has done a much better job this time at putting all of their information in one location. So sba.gov/PPP.
So I want to ask you though, so the second thing, and I know we packed so much in here, and thank you so much for
You're
taking
welcome.
off the year and sharing it with us. But here, what about all the other services? All the other services that your organization provides?
I know it's hard for people to believe that the SBA has existed before PPP, and we will continue to exist. But we do have a couple of great things. One is that we have just named 20 new women's business centers across America. We had, so we have a lot of services. We're really dedicated a lot of effort to helping women business owners, and we will continue that in the next year, hopefully. And we did get one of those. So it's located in the Erie area. It does come down as far as Lawrence County and Butler County. So we have that. Was a great win for us. We also are doing some other trainings. We have a new program. It's called Ascent, ASCENT. So going along with that woman business owner, woman entrepreneur component, we've been working on this last year of this president's administration, a lot of women's initiatives, and they have developed this program called Ascent. It's an online platform for women entrepreneurs, women small business owners, and it's an educational component. And you can go in and you take journeys, which are like we would consider a module, and you can go through all kinds of different training, and it is designed for women entrepreneurs and women business owners. It launched just on Monday. Monday was the launch. It's been developed for a while, but with PPP, we kept putting off the launch of it, but it was launched on Monday. It's called Ascent. You can find that on the SBA website. It's a great tool, completely free, designed for women entrepreneurs and small business owners. We're doing a lot with other groups as well. We have a lot of other things. We have an emerging leaders class that we're working on starting to fill. That is a 100% free program. It is about 8 months in length. We typically would meet twice a month face to face, but we think this time it's probably going to be virtual. If you know of anybody that, and this is not, that emerging leaders is not for startups. It's for people that have a couple $1 million in revenue already and are looking to get to the next level, especially if you're interested in government contracting, exporting products outside the United States. This is a great program where we come alongside you, work with you. We actually hire somebody from the outside that teaches that, and we work with you to get your business to that next level, to get you in government contracting, to get you exporting, to get that business up above that 5 million sales mark. So those are some of the things. You can always check us out on sba.gov and go to local resources, find our district office. We have a calendar on there of all the stuff that we have going on. But definitely, if you have any questions, WPAinfo@sba.gov. Always happy to help, to talk, to do whatever we can do to help.
Listen, she means it. They are responsive. They are definitely people. Your team has just been incredible, and really, really appreciate that. I think Megan, if you want some answers to that, she was talking about the 3.5%. That has to do with those hardest hit industries that have specific NAICS codes. So really, Kelly, we are going to stay close to you because you matter. You matter in terms of the work that all of us are doing. Thank you for taking the time. We packed a lot in here, and there's lots of resources that are out there. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Kelly. We're going to stay tightly connected to you, and I know that you're working hard on all our behalf. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, and thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone. See you again tomorrow.